James Farr here, live from Pasadena Media Studios. Get ready for more piercing and provocative and welcome to another episode of The Conversation Live. Conversation Live focuses on social justice, restorative justice, inclusion, and equality. Joining me today are two of my favorite people, although one of them not so much, but I have in the seat today Yvette McDowell, who is a cannabis consultant, and retired LAPD Sergeant Robert Grant. Here in Pasadena over the weekend, a totemic figure was lost. We want to remember the memory and the legacy of Miss Jaylene Mosley. Hannah, go ahead and run this clip, and we'll talk a little bit about Jaylene on the other side of this.
Just as her company's motto states, partners in the community, Jaylene Mosley, president and broker of J.L. Mosley Company Incorporated, always has the betterment of her community in mind. Although Jaylene's company develops and manages commercial real estate, it also works to promote neighborhood renewal and empowerment. Jaylene Mosley currently serves as the president of Flint Ridge Center, a nonprofit organization that forms partnerships to help children, youth, and families. Its mission to provide services that address unmet community needs and to develop collaborative solutions that reduce violence, improve academic achievement, and open career paths.
When she builds a building, she places a high regard for what the community wants to see there. So a survey was done, people got a chance to give their own input as to what they wanted to see in her building. And then she built the building with that in mind. And having an environmental impact and having a community impact. So there's a holistic view and approach to when she builds something.
And welcome back. Yvette, you worked with Jaylene. You've known Jaylene in this city for quite some time, and she meant so much to so many people. What is it like for the city to lose a person like Jaylene Mosley?
James, you really can't put it into words. Jaylene brought so much to the community. As a woman of non-color, to be so heavily invested into people of color, it was amazing. I remember when I first met Jaylene, I wondered, why is this white woman doing all of this for people of color? And after I got a chance to know her, talk to her in depth, it became apparent that her heart, it was simply her heart. She was interested in equality, wanted to see people treated fairly, people to have an opportunity. It's going to be a tremendous loss for the city of Pasadena.
I know she was often referred to as, at least when I first moved to Pasadena, as like the godmother of the Northwest. And, and again, we can laugh because Jaylene wore those glasses, right? Yeah. Like you couldn't mistake her. Every time you saw her, she was very kind and generous to my wife and myself. And, one of the, when I told her I was going to be doing The Conversation Live, we were supposed to be able to sit down and talk about that next year, in our next season. So, everybody is really hurting. Now, she did a lot of work in terms of with reentry and recidivism work and actually doing some job building skills. And Robert, I'm gonna come over to you again. But I know in your former capacity as a city prosecutor, you were part of the process that sent people away, and then she was part of the process that kind of made them whole. Robert, you've been saying that we need more job creation.
Absolutely.
We brothers who are coming in and out of jail need some help. When you think about the legacy of someone like Jaylene, what does that say to you?
Well, look, I was a street cop for 30 years, and I knew Jaylene through her work. And, I have to say that, for us, the hardest part is to know somebody's going to come out with no resources to get them back on track. And look, Jaylene, we all had the opportunity to know that they were warriors more than they are criminals, that people coming out of the system are trying to find a way out of the system. And she provided some things here in Northwest Pasadena and Altadena that were vital for some of these warriors to get back on track. So, I didn't know her personally. I knew her through her work, and that work was pretty amazing.
Yeah, I just going through some of the many social media posts and, You know, a couple of brothers reaching out to me and said, man, I'm hurt. You know, it's just, we've really lost a true jewel here. You know, she could be that jewel in that crown of our city, right? How do we keep her legacy going, Yvette?
Continuing the work that she started. I mean, it really is that simple. Continue what she started. Jaylene was pretty transparent with her vision and what she wanted to see for the community. And I believe that if that legacy can continue, will continue, then you will see some transformation continue. So it's a matter of the will. If people are willing to do what she started, then you will see her work continue.
Yeah, she had such an intergenerational space in her where, you know, you could see the young millennial.
Yeah.
You know, I'm reading some of the social media posts, you know, folks well in their 20s on up, you know what I mean?
Yes.
And how she has affected them, thanking her for the mentors and, you know, just the guidance and just the overall structure that she provided. I mean, one of my dearest friends here in this city is here because of her, and that's Brother Perry over at Perry's Joint. When he moved into Perry's Joint over at our place on Lincoln and Mountain. And so, you know, the relationship that I have and have made here in this community, I really owe to her, because that was kind of where I holed up a lot of times and, you know, met people and held court. Let me check in real quick. You're watching The Conversation Live. The Conversation Live focuses on social justice, restorative justice, inclusion, and equality. My guest today is retired LAPD Sergeant Robert Grant and Yvette McDowell, who is a municipal cannabis consultant, and she helps industries and cities kind of find that common gap. Now, this is where this conversation is going to go a little bit different. You know, we wanted to make sure that we paid homage to Jaylene Mosley, but I really wanted to talk with these two because Yvette was a guest on our show just a few weeks ago. Robert's, you know, I got to find new people to book. But Robert's been here before, too. And Robert usually has a pretty different opinion. But I want to talk about this cannabis industry. I want to talk about social equity. But let's first cue in this clip, Hannah. Let's roll this in, and we'll talk to them on the other side.
Legalization is a civil rights issue. Thousands of people are currently incarcerated for cannabis convictions, while others have flower delivered right to their front door.
In Los Angeles, the district attorney refuses to expunge or reclassify cannabis convictions.
In Pennsylvania, prior convictions prevent people from joining the medical cannabis workforce. And in Illinois, those same convictions have been preventing cannabis patients from being able to access medicine.
Meanwhile, states like Colorado and Washington exclude people with cannabis felonies from starting businesses at all.
This is why we need social equity.
So how did we get here? Let's start with the war on drugs. In 1971, President Nixon declared that drug abuse was public enemy number one. But what's not often talked about is how war on drugs was created to target people of color.
We knew we couldn't make it illegal to either be against the war or black. But by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did.
Welcome back. Robert, Yvette, thanks again for being in the seat. Robert, why have you been so critical about the cannabis industry? I mean, we just heard about the war on drugs. We've heard how, you know, police have certainly, I think, been a part of the problem, you know, in enforcing some of these laws. But why are you so... What's your issue with
against
it?
Yeah. You know, other than the play stuff, I've watched 3 different waves of times where our community have been used as a source of debauchery, for lack of a better term, where things have been brought into our community and it has raped our community. Started with alcohol. If you look at the distribution of alcohol in the city of Los Angeles, the cannabis locations are now very much similar to that. We saw cocaine come through.
Not even close.
Yes,
Come
it is
on,
very
Robert.
much. Don't get upset. Don't hate the messenger.
I
The
love
message is clear.
the messenger, but the
Don't
message
hate
is wrong.
the messenger. The bottom line
There's
is
liquor
the
stores on every
same
corner, but you can't buy
distribution-
cannabis
the
everywhere.
Same distribution of alcohol and liquor store locations are the same distributions of now dispensaries.
Right.
And ironically, they never end up in locations like Beverly Hills or other things like that. Here in Pasadena is another great example. We're going to put weed places over in Northwest Pasadena. I think they should put it over there in East Pasadena.
First of all, There will not be cannabis retail or recreational shops in Northwest Pasadena. Let's be clear about that. Yvette,
Thank you.
is Robert off his rockers? I mean,
Oh, why? Because I'm not a dope smoking hippie?
You know, I won't say Robert's off his rocker, but I will say Robert is misinformed.
Misinformed.
Oh,
Yes.
good Lord Jesus.
That's the best word to use, misinformed. You know, when we talk about cannabis and he compares it to alcohol, the one thing I can say is that we have medicinal purposes for cannabis. I don't know of any medicinal purposes for alcohol other than someone getting wasted or, you know, committing violence, domestic violence, or whatever, getting behind the wheel of a car, driving, tearing up something. But there has been recognized medicinal uses for cannabis, so we can talk about the good things. And for those who tend to use it recreationally, okay, they use it recreationally. But James, one thing I can say is the amount of time that I spent as a first responder, which was about 20 years in total, I went on numerous opioid overdoses. I went on numerous alcohol intoxicated folks, but never once did I go and talk to anybody who had overdosed on cannabis.
Okay,
Right,
Robert,
but
so
see
in
that-
your
but see, that's
30
not
years,
true.
did you ever respond to
Absolutely.
someone overdosed on cannabis?
Absolutely, because my most recent time is this past year is when I retired. But the reality is weed is not the way it was when Yvette was out there, and it's a lot different now. Not only is it stronger, but the overdoses are now showing up in the sicknesses. And one of the things we want to talk about is the marijuana-induced hyperemesis. People are getting sick because of the strength of the drug. They're actually finding themselves in hospitals because of it. But more importantly, they're taking the same concept of marijuana and they're throwing things in there like spice. They're throwing these synthetic things, and we're having ODs all over the place.
But spice and cannabis are not even the same conversation.
Don't try to push.
It's a synthetic.
Don't try to put them into the same category. They still are all trying to get out the tetrahydroxycannabinol. They both have got it. It's just a matter that one is souped up. So don't act like these are not the same drugs that are coming from the same genus of drugs that are out there. They are.
I mean, you've had a strong opinion that, you know, folks who utilize cannabis,
Right.
either recreational or medical, you know, will have trouble finding employment, keeping employment. And
look, the labor code right now is very clear on the idea of what is an at-will employment. And so the bottom line is that let's suppose some guy is out there on Saturday and Sunday smoking some recreational weed with mom and dad or whatever. On Thursday, he's going to have enough amount of THC in his blood that if he pees in a cup, he loses his job. So these good truck driving jobs, these good IT jobs, these other things that are technical or even just laborer jobs, they're going to lose them. And we in our community, in the black community, we don't have the luxury of giving up work. We don't have resources. We talked about it in the earlier segment about warriors that need the resources to keep from the recidivism going back up. We got to make sure that our youth and young adults aren't thrown out of jobs because they peed dirty in a cup for something that they did a week or two ago.
Yvette, is that a scheduling issue? Because I think if you depenalize cannabis from a federal level, his argument kind of goes out the door. Because I don't know if a person is any less safe or at higher risk from the use of cannabis. I mean, because some people just use CBD, which doesn't have the psychoactive components of THC in it. So there are some medicinal purposes.
Okay, but
and a guy climbing up that ladder 20 years, I'm sure his back hurts. So I want to ask Yvette about the scheduling and where we kind of are with legislation and social equity. Where
well, cannabis is still a Schedule I drug under the federal laws, which means it's lumped in a category with heroin and other opioid type of drugs, which it should not be. It just simply should not be. Where we are right now, who knows what's going to happen? You know, it's a matter of descheduling, rescheduling. We don't know what direction it's going to take, but the one thing that needs to happen is it needs to be taken out of that Schedule I drug.
Man.
Well, let me ask you a quick question, Robert. I mean, California obviously is more of the exception and less of the rule
Right.
in the greater scheme of the rest of the states. I mean, there are states that have legalized, the people have spoken
Sure.
and decided that they want it recreational.
Right.
But when you look at states like Louisiana, Georgia, Mississippi, where a joint less than half a gram can land you in one state a 5-year
Right.
sentence, in another state a 10-year sentence.
Right.
Aren't those laws just draconian? I mean,
Here's the thing. The reality is I'd say no. And this is the reason why. Because even though we want to reschedule and get it off of a Schedule I drug, it still causes impairment. It still causes more DUIs, even though it's drugs.
I mean, but I was just in New Orleans a few weeks ago, and you can walk out of your restaurant, out of the hotel, out of a bar with a big old 20-ounce cup of a hurricane.
A hurricane. Hallelujah for the hurricane. But
I mean, they ask you, do you want to take it to go?
But,
I mean, they encourage
but let me ask you on the same level. If you walked out of that same bar with a hurricane, can you get in a car and drive deuce? No, you can't. The same sort of thing happens. You cannot driving under the influence with a hurricane or weed.
I'm not talking about irresponsible consumption.
First of
I'm
all,
saying
a lot of people want to make this comparison as in, why aren't we treating them the same? Well, the bottom line is if we do treat them the same, there are consequences too. One of the consequences is that we do have more DUIs now. And even more than that, it impacts society. My biggest concern is this. We got people that will be losing their jobs because they pee dirty. It's hard enough to get these millennials lazy asses up to do some work, let alone the idea of get them high and get them fired 2 weeks from now.
First of all, you generational set tripping, but we'll leave that right there. But Yvette, so Robert's talking about more DUIs, and he kind of lumped it in there like cannabis and alcohol are all one and the same. But is there a real way to actually test as to when a person consumed cannabis, how much they've consumed cannabis, and how that would, based against the measurements that you would apply to alcohol?
The answer is no. There is not a way to determine when someone smoked. As a matter of fact, there's been a report that was published that talked about there is no increase in DUIs from cannabis consumption now that it's been made legal. It's been put out there in black and white. So it's a myth to say that cannabis smokers are now more prone to higher DUIs, things of that nature. That's simply not true. And it's out there. And as a matter of fact, there is no empirical evidence to show this amount of THC in the system causes impairment here and there. It's just not enough evidence yet to determine that. If someone is drinking and consuming cannabis at the same time, they don't know what's responsible for what. We know, again, going back to something you said, it is about responsible use. That's responsible use of cannabis, responsible use of alcohol. It doesn't matter what it is. It's about being responsible in what you do. And yes, Robert is correct that if someone is tested at their job and they've smoked maybe a week ago and it's still in their system, they do run the chances of having action taken against them. But at the same time, there is nothing that says, oh yeah, you have this amount of THC in your system and I know you must have smoked today. No, a week ago. So we need to have a change in the laws. This is going to be a long process as we move through. Just think about it. Cannabis just came on the scene in terms of legalization just recently, but cannabis has been here forever.
Right.
And yeah, people are starting to add this to it, add that to it. We're not talking about you're straight up out of the ground smoking now. Not when you're putting additives in that's going to change the composition. This is not what we're talking about. We're talking about people smoking straight, good out of the ground cannabis that's been tested. You know what's in it. You know the pesticides that are in it, what shouldn't be there. So we're not talking about spice and all of this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think Robert is certainly kind of coloring the narrative. Let me check in. You're watching The Conversation Live. Conversation Live focuses on social justice, restorative justice, inclusion, and equality. My guest today is retired Los Angeles Police Sergeant Robert Grant III, and he has Many of you may know him as the resident rebel rouser here, and
not.
just the point of contention and
I am
disagreement.
not.
And then we are ever so happy to have the highly intelligent,
Affable, lovable.
Well, thank you.
Yvette.
hey man, it's not your turn, highly intelligent Yvette McDowell, who's an attorney, a municipal cannabis consultant. And we're just kind of unpacking and talking a little bit about cannabis today and the cannabis industry. Robert, you talk about jobs. Why not see more of us go into the industry?
Okay, because
I mean, Mormons sell alcohol, they don't
Sure.
drink. I mean,
sure, and I think that they are users of the community too. This exact same argument about the idea of, why don't we sell it? Because, quite frankly, we can make money off it, is the exact same argument I heard when they're, throwing crack cocaine around. The dope dealers back then were saying the exact same thing that dope dealing weed dealers are saying today. As far as I'm concerned, I think if you're preying on the community, remember, there's somebody you're leaving behind you in your wake. Yeah, you'll make money, but remember, how many of these people, for example, one of the things that the research is showing that the weed is much stronger, it's causing a psychosis in people that use it chronically, use it regularly, use it maybe even excessively. Well, that same sort of psychosis, people are left behind. They're going to emergency rooms, they're finding themselves in a position where their behavior at home is becoming tested, because the reality is they smoke too much weed.
that's
Don't
just
get
not.
mad.
That's just
I'm
not.
just a messenger.
That's not founded though.
Okay,
Robert. I mean,
wait a second. I brought resources.
A lot of
just in case.
I mean,
I brought resources just because you know how you are.
I mean,
because remember, live science.
Considering
how
a lot
marijuana
of-
may drive a brain to psychosis. That was in 2012. Psychology and neuroscience beta said that how drugs cause psychosis in 2017, and that was talking about marijuana.
Did you get that off another Republican website?
I happened to actually look at a conservative site. As a matter of fact, I did. Thank you very much. But here's the deal. We can't act like these things are not going on. We want to act like, it's not causing psychosis, that it's not causing the hyperemesis. It is. People are affected by it, and it hurts them.
I mean, I don't disagree with the fact that too much of anything can lead you to, some certain gray areas. But I can imagine on a Saturday leisure afternoon when, the bachelor that you are at home, tidying up the house, you may enjoy a margarita and a fine cigar.
And a fine cigar.
Is there any truth to that? I don't see.
It was more tequila than margarita, too. But
So should we attribute, your kind of bizarre beliefs as that maybe you needed another drink or you had too much to drink?
You can attribute it to
because
that, but here's the
sometimes I
deal.
think you're drunk in the Republican love.
Okay, well, here's the thing. I'm drunk on the conservative level.
Conservative level,
I always
okay.
have to correct you, because this whole party, pick a team thing, I ain't going for it, because the red man ain't for me. All right. But the reality is, I do live a conservative life. And I believe as a conservative life, I should never eliminate me or my children from jobs. I should never put them in a position to where, quite frankly, their behavior hurts them in the long run. I should never, be that example of something that sucks because it felt good. And I think a lot of these people that are out here, smoking like chimneys that are selling because they think it's okay to sell, I think it's wrong.
I mean,
it's amoral.
but again, the first time you appeared here and we talked about this, Robert, I mean, you're not going after Jack Daniels, you're not going after Seagram's, you're not going after Anheuser-Busch, and I would argue to you that those products are more readily available.
When Jack Daniels is in the street driving drunk, I go after him. When Jack Daniels is drunk wandering down your street and peeing into your rose bushes, I'm going to do something about him. When these alcohols make you so impaired that you impact the rest of society, then yeah, I'm happy to drag you in. Same sort of thing for marijuana, and I know that there's no quantitative thing for what makes you high and what does not make you high, but we have been testing. I'm a drug recognition expert. I have been testing people for drug use for almost 25 years.
And you know what? That's
impairment.
Now you get into an area that a lot of law enforcement use that as a reason for pretextual stops and speculative things.
You don't see somebody high when they're driving.
There's no science. There's no science to that. Yvette,
okay.
Let's try to. And I want because we finally got Robert to say marijuana. After about 23 minutes, right? So maybe we're helping him in some aspect of it. But when we look at when people talk about some of the marijuana or weed, as he said. We've got him to up it a little bit to marijuana, but just even how that is racialized, and when you put that stigma, and they're looking at more industry standards and normals of just calling it cannabis, the plant that it is.
Yeah.
Give Robert maybe a little bit of that backstory on how we end up in that space. We got about 3 minutes before we're gonna get out of here.
Cannabis is the name. Just call it what it is, cannabis. You know, we talk about weed, all of this stuff. We're talking reefer madness days.
I like that
let's
movie.
let's move beyond reefer madness, because that was the biggest piece of crap that I've ever seen.
What is the enlightenment we should have today?
The enlightenment we should have today is that there are great uses for cannabis, great uses. Education. We have to have robust education around the plant itself, around the uses of the plant. We have to do a lot of what needs to be done with alcohol, which I find alcohol is not as, I mean, it's not talked about in the light that cannabis is talked about right now. So let's get people educated. Let's get our young people educated. Let's talk about the consequences that are associated with it. Things of that nature. Okay. Yeah, go ahead. Your question.
But the question would be this: I don't mind educating. For example, I am very much an advocate in the the disease of cancer.
Yes.
And I understand how some of these how the THC and the weed help some people that are going through some of the adverse symptoms and stuff like that. So I see the upside. But are we going to talk about it honestly to where we're going to say, okay, if we're going to educate, we're going to tell you here are the pros and here are the cons. The pros are when you got somebody that's got a disease that is attacking their intestinal tract, it softens the pain. And that's a beautiful thing. On the other hand, when little Johnny or little Joseph or little Juan or little whatever is out there smoking like a chimney, he could find himself hospitalized with psychosis and hyperemesis.
I mean, but I think, let me say this, because you've asked me this before,
Sure.
how would I feel about my daughter consuming? Right. And the answer is, of course I would. I don't think, as with alcohol, you shouldn't consume it. You shouldn't be able to consume it at 21. I think just as with law enforcement, you shouldn't be able to be an officer until you're 25. Where I'm going with this is your brain is more developed. And so I don't think a minor, a child, a kid should be consuming, utilizing cannabis, alcohol, or tobacco. But to Yvette's point, we have to have the conversation with our children so that they're more informed. It's no different. Our children are growing up now. My parents didn't party. They didn't drink or smoke or do anything. But you did go to places where there may have been alcohol.
But can I ask you a question?
And be consumed.
A real quick question. Yeah. Quick question. And I get the idea of the younger, but what happens when you've got somebody that's like in 30? And they're having a hard time, getting a job. They don't have all the life skills that they may need. They may be, in our community. And they find themselves consuming a lot of weed. What do we do for them?
Well, I mean, I think they need to make some different choices. I mean, I don't know many 30-year-olds that have completely figured out where they're going in life, what choices they may be, especially generationally now, not committed to one career or another. So I don't think that you should kind of group in their recreation.
What do we do for them? Because here's the thing, me and you agree on one thing for sure. We want to see the community move forward, and I know Yvette has done that. What do we do to help them move forward? This pothead.
Well, we're going to have to answer that next season because we are hard on the time. Yvette, Robert, thank you so much for sitting down with me. And Robert, we may invite you back. Yvette, you're always welcome.
Thank you, sir.
Again, thank you for watching The Conversation Live. We focus on piercing and provocative conversation, social justice, restorative justice, inclusion, and equality. Until we have another opportunity to speak with you, as always, agape.